Ayan. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the 20th Summer Institute in the Natural Sciences and Mathematics from the Biology Cluster with the sub-theme Facilitating the Collation and Interpretation of Biodiversity Information in the Digital Age. So I am Jodeline B. Melegrito. I am an instructor from the Department of Biology, and I will be your moderator for the first lecture today. Yesterday, we tackled the overview of common vertebrates through the talk of Dr. Aris Reginaldo, the public as a crucial partner in monitoring the status of marine systems in Dr. Romeo Dizon's lecture, and the contribution of citizen science in marine plastics pollution monitoring in the lecture and workshop by Dr. Paul Samuel Ignacio. To continue our discussion about knowledge generation and documentation, public involvement, and emerging technologies in appreciating diversity and understanding biology, we arrange a series of lectures and a workshop today with topics ranging from artificial intelligence in neuroscience, bioinformatics, and citizen science. Let me just acknowledge the Systems and Networks Office for being with us and supporting us from the very start, and the CS SINSM Committee for all their efforts in spearheading the SINSM this year, the Department of Biology for conducting these lectures and workshops, and of course, to you, our dear participants, for joining as we bring biodiversity and digital age into the conversation together. Before we start our first lecture, and here are some reminders about our etiquette. Okay, so thank you for that, Yan. Thank you very much for these reminders. And may we be continually reminded of this as we go through our series of lectures today. So again, hello po sa mga participants natin sa Zoom and mga nanonood po through our live stream sa YouTube. And now, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for today. Okay, so Sir Pablo Serrano is a assistant professor at the Department of Biology at the University of the Philippines, Baguio. He's an exemplary academician and researcher who obtained his Bachelor of Science degree in Biomedical Science and Master of Science degree in Neuroscience from the University of Ottawa, Canada, and is currently dedicating his knowledge and skills as an educator for cell and molecular biology, neuroscience, and physiology and virology courses. He is recognized not only for his academic excellence and extensive research experience, but also in his involvement in extracurricular activities and volunteerism. He graduated magna cum laude during his bachelor's degree, received an Award of Excellence, and granted with scholarship by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research during his undergraduate studies and graduate studies. So his passion in the field of neuroscience is attested in his various studies. Recently, he investigated the expression pattern and role of NPAS4, a calcium-dependent transcription factor, in regulating the neural circuitry during motor learning. And his current research interests include molecular mechanisms underlying learning and memory in cell and circuit-specific levels. So at present, Sir Pablo continuously dedicates his efforts here in the University of the Philippines by mentoring students in honing their laboratory skills and developing relevant and scientifically sound thesis topics. In his lecture, he will present about artificial intelligence as a new branch point in neuroscience and human history. So please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Uh, I hope you're able to see my screen, and I hope you can see my video as well. Thank you, Mom Jodelyn, for that introduction. And good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for being here today. It is a pleasure to have this talk with you. And thank you for the Department of Biology and the University of the Philippines, Baguio, for organizing the SINSM 2023 and having me as a speaker. So for today's topic, as was mentioned, it's about artificial intelligence being a new branch point in neuroscience and human history. But I do hope that you have already asked your questions regarding artificial intelligence to Sir Paul Ignacio yesterday, because although this is my main topic today, my field of expertise more are towards the neuroscience aspect of it. More towards the neuroscience aspect of it. So this talk will be more about more through the lens of cognitive neuroscience. I'd like to start off by introducing my previous research. I recently just graduated my master's degree last year, and this was our research in our lab back in Canada. So our lab is focused on investigating various molecular and cellular processes that occurs in the primary motor cortex during motor learning. The primary motor cortex is we investigated because this is the brain region that is associated with voluntary motor control, motor planning, adaptation, and of course, motor learning. And we investigate these processes using mice as our animal model of interest. In our most recent paper, which is the project that I was working on, we trained mice to do this head-fixed pellet reaching task, where the mice are head-fixed, so they can't move their head, and they're trained to pick up a food from this motorized bar using their left hand and place it in their mouth. So the mice, as we train them to do this, they have to do it head-fixed. And this is because we want to take a look at what's happening in their brain as the mice are learning this task. And how do we do that? Well, we perform a surgery on the mice, a craniotomy, where we open up and expose the brain, remove a little bit of the skull, more specifically exposing the primary motor cortex. And then we inject virus into the primary motor cortex so we can fluorescently label the neurons that are in this region of the brain. And then afterwards, we replace the skull with a glass window so that we can take a look at what's happening in the neurons of that region as the mice are learning this task under a microscope called 2-photon. And what we specifically look at is that are the things that are happening in the primary motor cortex as the mice are learning this task. We look at the neuronal activity, and the changes in connectivity as the mice are learning this head-pix pellet reaching task. Essentially, in this paper, what we found is that there's this specific protein that is important during motor learning because it regulates the activity pattern and the connectivity that occurs, or the changes in activity and connectivity that occurs during motor learning. So those are sort of my field of expertise. But when I was asked to give a talk and I was given the theme, I didn't know how my field of expertise could be integrated in this year's theme. But some of the things that I was given was perhaps talk about data sets, which are a collection of information related to a specific subject. Now, I have not, I have used data sets in the past, but I don't know my way around a specific data set to kind of give a talk about it. So, but what I do know is the usage of data sets or its general application. So I kind of worked from there on my understanding of how data sets are used and kind of integrated my knowledge so I can give this talk today. So some of general application for data sets is that it is used for organization. So again, it's a collection of related information regarding a specific subject. So if these information are organized, we will be able to have easier access to these information. And with that easier access, we would be able to compare specific data sets with similar or overlapping parameters, so we can perform analysis between them. And if this parameter is related to time, then we can identify trends associated with it and apply mathematical equations to create models using the data sets that we have. And this is essentially what I will be talking to you about today, how we use data sets in our day-to-day lives, and how our fundamental understanding of data sets has led to the design and the development of one of the most technologically advanced and powerful innovations that our generation has yet to encounter, at least in. So for today's talk, this will be the general layout. So I'll talk briefly and discuss and introduce artificial intelligence, although Sir Paul Ignacio kind of already did that yesterday. And hopefully, I'd also like to tackle some of these questions. I won't answer them, I won't answer them as it is, as its own question, but I hope to kind of go through them and hopefully you can generate your own understanding about the topic and kind of generate your own answer to these questions, which essentially what is artificial intelligence and how is it related to data sets, how neuroscience has contributed to AI design and how AI is now contributing to neuroscience and the society as a whole. And then I'll try to relate artificial intelligence and all of these topics to our sub-theme, which is facilitating the collation and interpretation of biodiversity information in the digital age. And we'll go through these questions and how, in terms of how we can access data sets and perhaps create new ones, and how we can use these data sets and how AI can use these data sets and interpret these results. And lastly, relating it to the general theme of SINSM, which is how we can modify or recalibrate our current education system to simultaneously prevent AI from interfering with learning, our students' learning, but at the same time, since AI is here to stay, promote its utilization in our education system. Okay. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence is a computer system that can perform specific tasks which typically require human intelligence. That being said, what is human intelligence? Human intelligence is our ability to reason, solve problems, and adapt to new environments or situations. But how are we able to do this? How are we able to reason and solve problems and adapt? And this occurs, or our ability to do this is due to learning. And essentially, the development of AI is understanding how we learn and applying these concepts that we learned from neuroscience in terms of how we learn and applying them to the computer. But here's a brief overview of how we learn. Well, we have our current understanding of the world, and based on that current understanding of the world, we respond to our environment, and it also modulate how we experience the world based on our current understanding. And as we go through our day-to-day lives, we experience the world around us. And as we experience the world around us, we, through our senses, we process these information that are coming in and encode them into our brains, where we create these data sets, essentially, of information that we experience. And then from there, we update our understanding of the world. And this cycle continues and becomes refined and developed as we grow. And this is essentially the idea behind learning. Now, to be more specific, how are these memories or experience encoded? And how do we use these memories? Essentially, how do we acquire these databases that we store in our brain? Well, in the cellular level, memories are believed to be encoded through these network of neurons called engrams. So these, in my animation here, these circles represent neurons, which are specialized cells in our nervous system that can activate itself, other neurons, and other specialized cells such as muscles. Essentially, through when we experience causes specific neurons or specific networks of neurons to activate. And each experience is associated with a unique set of network of neurons activating with it. Now, memories are believed to be encoded within these network of neurons, where, for example, if this network were to be disrupted by ablating one of the neurons, then this would result in memory impairment. So this is how we kind of learned that perhaps, or we deducted that these engrams are essentially a way for our brains to encode memories. Now, as I mentioned, each experience is related to a specific memory. So let's say that you have this network of neurons that is associated with your loved ones. So your crush, let's say that. And your crush is able to, or makes really good food. In this case, let's say it's adobo. And adobo is associated with this neural network in colored green here. Now, as you can see here, there's a neuron where your crush and adobo kind of overlaps. And so every time this neuron is activated, let's say you're eating adobo and then this neuron is activated, there's a probability, in fact, there's a stronger probability that it can also activate the neural network associated with your crush. And this is how you get reminded of your crush not every time, but a lot of times when you're eating your favorite meal from her or him. And when you get reminded, because of these neurons, you get reminded, or these two overlapping networks kind of allows you to be reminded of two differently associated things. And from there, you can make the decision of whether you're going to call your crush, or you just keep eating the food that you have in front of you. Now, this understanding of a neural network kind of led to the development of AI. And this is generally how AIs work. Essentially, databases are within these network of information, or collection of information in the AI system, and it is hardwired there either by the programmer or by the user's input itself. And every time you use an AI, you put in a prompt, and this prompt essentially is triggering that neuron where these network of information overlaps. And the computer processes these information according to your prompt and generate an output. This is why the more specific your prompt is, the more refined your output becomes. Because more network is being involved in that prompt of yours. So this is essentially or generally how the basic AI works. There are different types of AIs. There are rule-based AIs that operates on a set of predefined rules or logical statements. And there's machine learning AI, and I think this is what Dr. Ignacio talked about yesterday, that involves training an AI system on a large data set and allowing it to learn and improve its performance over time. And there's deep learning AI that I think we're just starting to get into and more delve towards. And this is a subset of machine learning that involves using artificial neural network to process and analyze data. And I will be mostly giving examples of machine learning and deep learning AIs in our society today. So I think this is the example or the AI that Sir Ignacio was talking about yesterday, which is image recognition. So for us, essentially, image recognition AI is an AI that would allow you to identify an image based on based on the databases that it has. So for example, if you want an AI to be able to identify a tree, if you feed it a picture of a tree, then it will tell you that it is a tree, or if it's not a tree. And this requires a large data set so that you can train the AI to identify whether it's a tree or not, even if it's fed a new experience or a new image. So, but I'm going to relate this back to how are we as humans able to do this? Well, we do this through our experience. So we know that this image is a tree, but we also know that this is also a tree, even though it has a different shade, even though it has a different structure, different lighting even. And this is also a tree, even though it's a different point of view. And we know that this is also a tree, even though it's animated. So if we try to describe what a tree is it the presence of leaves? Well, this is not a tree, even though it has leaves. So if it's not the leaves, is it the branches? Well, that is a tree, even though it doesn't have leaves. But this is not a tree, even though it looks like branches. So we are able to identify a tree from not a tree based on our experience. As we develop, we get exposed to more and more trees in different times of days and different environments, so that whenever we see a tree, even though we haven't seen it from the past, we are able to identify that it is in fact a tree. So essentially what you're trying to do is getting the AI to, you're feeding the AI a lot of information so that it can recognize patterns that makes a tree look like what it is, so I can identify it in the future. So how do we use AI more specifically in neuroscience? So now, even though neuroscience has paved the way, or neuroscience, neuropsychology, psychology even, has paved the way to the formation of AI. Now AI is now being used to improve or to improve our understanding of these fields as well. In our lab, as I mentioned, we study motor learning, and we use this deep learning AI called Deep Lab Cut. Essentially, this AI, you instruct the AI to track specific points on a video, and you train the AI to track specific points, let's say in a mouse. So here, the AI is told to track the head all the way to the tail. And you, after a certain number of training, the AI will be able to go through the entire video pixel by pixel and track these points throughout the entirety of the video. So essentially, this Deep Lab Cut has become a game changer for behavioral scientists such as myself and my lab mates. So what we did was, we tracked using Deep Lab Cuts the hand movements of the mice that we are training, and every single trial of the video. And we do this so that we can analyze the movements of the hand and see if it's actually becoming refined, if it's becoming repetitive throughout as trial progress, right? And as the mice do this, we take a look at the activity of the neurons and the dendrites. So we can, and this is time locked, so we can identify exactly the activity of the neurons as the mice moves with a degree of specificity in terms of angle, in terms of the position or point of attack of the mice. Sometimes it can be from the front, sometimes it can be from the side. So this changes the activity of what's happening in the brain. And essentially, now that AI, which again was developed through neuroscience or aspects of neuroscience, the technology is now coming into full circle and is being applied back to understanding the brain. And with that in mind, AI is now being used for other applications in neuroscience, such as prosthetics. So for example, our brain, as you probably already know, generates brain waves, and this is because of neuronal activity. And a team in Stanford tries to decode the neuronal activity so that it can, the AI will be able to identify these latent factors, which is the underlying data associated with arm movement in this case. So, so the brain itself makes a lot of noise, but only a specific neuron activation are associated with the movement of the arm. So essentially what they're doing is using the brainwave activity and feeding it to the AI so that the AI can recognize what are the important neuronal activities that is specifically associated with the movement of an arm. And then after the AI decodes that, they will employ that information, use that information to kind of move the prosthetic arms of these patients. So with this, the AI has to recognize specific neuronal activity pattern, and it has to be very precise in terms of the angle of the arm movement, which digits needs to be moved, at what direction. So this is essentially what this technology is trying to do. And besides neuroscience application, as you can probably imagine, this is also applicable in medicine. And medicine or healthcare system are now utilizing AIs they're now utilizing AIs as an application for various aspects of healthcare. So in medicine, they subdivided it into two categories. There's the physical AIs in medicine. Some example of this is the Da Vinci surgical robot. And this robot essentially it's a combination of AI and robotics. So what it does is it applies the image recognition, the one that I discussed earlier and that was discussed yesterday, to mimic the movement of the surgeon's hands to perform the surgery. And this is actually very important, especially if the surgery is laparoscopic, right? And now it is actually being used in surgeries, gynecological surgeries or urological surgeries. So this is one of the applications of how AI has entered medicine. But I mean, even in our day-to-day lives, Fitbits and other health tracker apps, they can detect your heart rates. Some of them can. Some can detect your sleeping pattern, etc. And these are very important, especially when determining abnormalities that can occur. So some Fitbits some apps in Fitbits can alert the user if there's any abnormalities, and this can be very informative to the physician. And there are others out there that are still currently being developed. So for example, there's the intelligent hand hygiene AI, where an AI is being trained to distinguish between a dirty hand or a hand with pathogens versus a clean hand. So this can be very helpful for physicians and nurses, especially in surgical procedures. There are AIs out there that can detect behavioral changes, more specifically in elderly people. They're intended for the use of elderly people that lives by themselves. And there are applications out there that are being developed to equip virtual assistants AIs to detect mental health, interpersonal violence, or physical health concerns that would allow these virtual assistant tools to detect if there's any abnormalities and advise the person or the user if they should seek professional help. That is the physical aspect of medicine. Briefly going into it, there's also the virtual aspect of medicine, and this is where generalist medical AIs come into play. So in this case, the AI would be able to help physicians in making diagnosis. So the papers that I read talks about one of the most inefficiencies and errors even that occurs in medicine is due to hyper specialization of physicians in their own respective field. So for example, if a patient is diagnosed with a complex disease like cancer, a lot of specialists needs to get involved. Oncologists, radio-oncologists, radiologists, your family physician, and depending on where the cancer is found, other specialists needs to be involved. Now, this can be very inefficient because everyone has to set a time for them to meet, and everyone has their own set of expertise and approach. But if you have a generalist medical AI that has information and database about all of these aspects, then the decision making would be even more efficient, and it would be even faster. This was a quote from Professor Leskovic from Stanford Engineering. He said that the exciting and groundbreaking part is that generalist medical AI models will be able to ingest different types of medical information, such as imaging studies, lab results, and genomic data, and then perform tasks that we instruct them to do, such as diagnosis, and they can do this at such a much faster rate. Now, with these tools being available, of course, it also comes with a bunch of advantages and disadvantages. More specifically in medicine, some of the disadvantages is loss of jobs. AIs lack human touch, empathy, and emotional intelligence. But it also comes with numerous advantages, such as I mentioned, it is more efficient. It is accurate, accurate and precise, because it has a large data set that it works with. It decreases the workload of doctors and allows doctors to have more patient-doctor interaction time, and it saves money and better monitoring. But as I list those advantages and disadvantages, you may have identified how AI can also be employed to different aspects of our society besides neuroscience and medicine. And AI is now being used, of course, also in finance. In terms of, as I mentioned, AIs are being used to model things. So a lot of businesses try or attempts to use AI to find trends and model stock market. And this has allowed improved accuracy. Again, of course, if there's a lot of data sets that you're working with, then there would be your results or the prediction models will be a little bit more accurate, and it increases efficiency. And AIs are better at identifying risks and hazards and mitigating them. And there's improved customer service, generally speaking. I mean, you've probably spoken to chatbots in websites, and usually users have similar questions than they would encounter similar problems, and chatbots are really useful for that. And of course, for the companies that have all of these advantages, because they use an AI, this also presents a competition advantage. So the companies that use these technologies and these tools would have a great advantage versus those companies that do not. In fact, based from this paper that has taken a look at the top 200 AIs, I believe it's back in 2022, and as you can see here, there is a substantial increase in trend in terms of the funding that is being used for being used by these startup companies for developing their AIs. And this trend actually continues to increase. And as AI makes its way into our society, of course, it also finds its way into our homes. I mean, Netflix is able to give you suggestions of movies, and oftentimes these suggestions are better than a lot of other suggestions out there, because AI is able to track the type of movies that you watch and find these patterns and essentially give you a recommendation based on your previous history. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there are virtual assistants, AIs such as Cortana, Siri, Google. These are some of the examples. And last time I went back to Canada, some individuals are already using these self-driving cars. These are run by AI as well. And as it makes its way into our home, of course, it is also making its way into our education system. So I don't know if you're already aware of these things, but even the most basic tools that we use in school today, such as Microsoft Word, also uses AI. I don't know if you've noticed, but with autocorrect, AI can, of course, identify errors in your sentences and grammatical errors in your sentences. But as you can see here, I specifically made a mistake in spelling out artificial, but Microsoft Word was not able to determine or suggest a change, or was not able to suggest artificial at the first run. So you can see there. So I had to correct it myself. But once the word artificial has been used in the sentence, I will make the same mistake again. And as you can see, the first suggestion is AI or artificial already. Oops. The first suggestion after I made that first error was the word that I already used in the previous sentence. So that's kind of cool. I mean, back then we used to use typewriters, or I didn't use them, my parents did, where you have to remove the paper and make your edits and then put the paper back in, and then you have to physically backspace the typewriter. Now you just have to press the button, and sometimes you don't even have to press them because of autocorrect. But from autocorrect, there are AIs out there that is not just correcting your spelling and grammar, but they are able to write your essays for you. In this case, I got this AI called ChatGPT to write this presentation for me, which I kind of use as my layout, to be honest. But this is how far our AI has come. And we need to be aware of these things so that we can better equip ourselves as educators in terms of educating future students. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so relating it back to our sub-theme, which is facilitating the collation and interpretation of information in general, not just biodiversity information during this digital age. Well, the collation aspect, as I mentioned, AIs are able to run because of these databases. So now that you have access to these AIs, who has access to all of these databases, you have easier access to all of these information, which makes your research a lot more efficient. But it can also be used to identify fields of research where information is still lacking. So so maybe if you're running out of ideas to research, or field ideas of what you want to research, you can think of things and then see if there's a lot of information to it. If there isn't any, perhaps that's also the field of research that you could go into. So it's easily identifiable with AI technologies. In terms of interpretation of data, AIs can interpret data. As I mentioned, it can model and find patterns. But more specifically for biodiversity, AI has been used for species identification. This can also be in the genetic level. So yes, you can identify species based on the image. So the image recognition, there are AIs for that. But there are AIs also that determines species based on the genes sequence. So if you have a genetic sequence that you don't know where it came from, you can run it through AI and they can search its databases and identify those species. It can also map habitats and species distribution. This uses remote sensing data generally. And and it can also be used to assess threats, more specifically habitat loss, presence of invasive species, or assessment of threat regarding climate change. And data integration, which essentially allows you to integrate data from multiple sources. So if you want to identify biodiversity throughout time, perhaps you can look through the databases of museums and compare them to the biodiversity that we have now based on satellite images or previous searches. So with all of these information in hand, how are we going to recalibrate our education, not just in science and mathematics? How are we going to recalibrate our education system to kind of address all of these things? So throughout history, innovations such as AI has always been the main engine of improved standard living. In this case, with AI, it's the primary thing that it allows is the easy access of information and even its interpretation. But the process of innovation can also be very disruptive because it makes the conventional way, it can make it somewhat obsolete. So how are we going to change the way we teach students in incorporating these tools that are available, but at the same time not have it disrupt their learning? Perhaps a more subjective question is, if the student has access to all of these information, how are they going to learn how these informations are generated to begin with, or how to interpret data? Is it even important to teach students how to do this? Essentially, what I'm trying to say is change is inevitable. And just think about it as students coming into school with their own set of best friends. And these best friends essentially just knows everything. So how are you going to teach the student to know the important things without AI interfering in that process? It's kind of become a cliche at that point. Of course, it needs some balance. And I don't have a lot of experience with regards to teaching. And I know, and I understand that everyone has their own set of teaching strategies and methodologies. So instead of telling you how to teach your classes, I will identify the extremes. And this is something that we do in neuroscience. I will name the two extremes, which is completely discouraging AI and fully encouraging AI. And hopefully you can find your own strategy to kind of meet in between of these two extremes. For completely discouraging AIs, of course, you can use just in class, pen and paper. Student has to memorize, student has to know everything, and then you quiz them based on that. And of course, with these previous years, online has become almost a replacement. Although now we're getting back to the old way of things, but a lot of things are still being held online. For example, if you as an educator is not available to be there physically, you can hold classes online. So if this is the case, you can you can assess the class by discouraging copy and pasting. And I do this myself. I discourage copy and pasting by putting my questions as images instead of as a Word document. So if your questions are an image form, they would not, no one would be able, or your students would not be able to copy and paste the sentences that you put, even though it is given virtually. And you can focus on the house. So by that, for example, you're teaching the student to learn long division. You can, instead of giving the two answers, the two values that needs to be divided to each other, show your work kind of thing. And of course, there are plagiarism checkers. There's Turnitin, and there are these things called GANs, which are generative adversary networks, something like that, which is a form of AI that can detect the work of other AIs. If you want to fully encourage AI, you can teach about AIs and the different platforms that uses AI. And then if you're going to teach AIs, you, as I mentioned, you expose them to different types of AIs and the platform that uses them. You teach about also the limitations of AIs and what are the things that can be done to catch the work of an AI, and how to use AIs properly. And you can also generate assignments that will promote the use of these technologies. Essentially, it's important for both aspects. It's important to know the limitations of AI or its current limitation at the moment. So right now, although there are a lot of AIs that are trying to detect, use images, it is still poor at identifying images. A lot of AIs also do not have access to real-time data. So, for example, ChatGPT will not have access to let's say, the weather pattern yesterday. So it won't have access to that. So if you're you can modify your education system based on that. And some databases of these AIs are not being updated. So you can check the references so you can check the references of some of these AIs and see that they may no longer be available. So that is also a limitation of AI. So with that, I think it's important, and what I want you to take away from this is how important it is to be updated, not just on the things that we are teaching, but generally with what's happening in our society. That being said, thank you, everyone. That is my presentation, and I'd be happy to take up some questions and concerns and comments or complaints. Thank you.
Okay, so ayan, thank you, Sir Pablo, for that interesting and insightful lecture. So ayan, okay, so we learned that AI as a computer system that can perform tasks by simulating human intelligence. And actually, I particularly liked how Sir discussed human learning incongruent with how AI works. So, ayan, naintindihan natin kung paano nag-work yung mga applications such as ChatGPT, so text prediction and suggestions, and ano yung basis of recommendations na nakikita natin sa social media feed and some streaming sites like Netflix. So, ayun, aside from those, ayan, we also learn what are the things that we should consider as educators in the rise of AI use. And we became updated of the considerations or ethical considerations in AI. So, ayan, thank you again, Sir Pablo. So, for the meantime, let's have a 10-minute break muna. So, and while you are enjoying your coffee or merienda, yan, you may refer to our chat box for the link of data evaluation form, and you may key in your questions yan, in the Q&A tab in our Zoom. Okay, so ayan, enjoy, relax, and see you again in a while. Okay, so ayan. And I hope nakapag-re-energize po tayo through our short break. And now let's proceed to our open forum. So for those who have not key in their questions yet, you may place questions and reactions in the Q&A section in Zoom. And of course, please do not forget to indicate your name and affiliation together with your question. Okay, so ayan, let's proceed with the Q&A proper. So ayun, Sir Pablo, we have the first question here. So do you see a future where human brains can be connected to AI and do the thinking or working with that tapping? So or a future where robots take the place of human teachers. So their question is related to a reading where the author was saying or was trying to raise an issue, will the future need humans? Okay.
Okay, these are somewhat philosophical questions, I'd say. In terms of AI being or AI kind of integrating with the human brain, is that the question, or something along those lines?
Yes, yes, sir.
As much that's a tough question, and I'm trying to contextualize it. Right now, the AI is being used to decode the human brain. So, and the human brain itself is really complicated. And hard to decode because of a lot of connections and activities. Now, if a human brain can be created synthetically or through hardwire. I'd say that it is a possibility, but I don't think that, or maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it happening in the next 10 years or something. Although the I read this somewhere. The existence of the brain is an evidence that it is possible for AI for human intelligence to be essentially created. Essentially, AI is just putting the math behind what's happening in the brain. Does that make sense?
So in a way, and it's not possible for AI to be entirely dominate our society in a way, and they would still depend on human presence, but then something like that.
Yes. Well, as far as I can see right now, in terms of like the near, within my generation, maybe, because AIs are used to make the lives of people easier. They're not meant to replace.
Yes.
And generally, if I actually tried this with ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT if it's able to correct its own code. So AIs are limited to its own coding. So AIs are coded and they are not able to change their own coding. But and they play around those limitations. So in that aspect, humans still has their own set of controls. Yes. And also reproduction is also a key aspect. So yes, AI might be able to do these complicated things that are far more advanced than humans, but can it reproduce itself? That is another question or not. And usually AIs are more specific, and AIs are designed to do a specific task. And these tasks are just one aspect of the things that we can do. So for example, there's an AI for image recognition, but that you can't use that AI for image recognition to make essays for you. That's a different type of AI. Or you can't use that language processing AI for interpretation of mathematical data. So yes, does that make this? I hope that cleared up a little bit.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, in essence, we AI cannot entirely replicate what humans can do, and they cannot replace us. Yan. So, sa ngayon parang ganun yung nakikita natin. Okay, so ayan, reaction from question sender po from Ma'am Alma din kanina. So although we know the huge benefits in terms of medical management. So ayan, actually in relation to that question yun sa medical management, and I actually saw Baymax on your presentation earlier. So is there a huge possibility for virtual assistants and medical assistants to evolve into that form in the near future? What do you think about that?
Right. That's a good question. So based on my readings, they are only, so for example, IBM Health is developing these AIs that will be able to detect abnormalities, but these companies are not trying to replace health professionals. So AIs are only able to are only able to detect abnormalities, but and then based from those, advise people to seek professional help. So in that sense, the AIs are not the one who's diagnosing, or generally you can ask an AI specific symptoms and it would provide you a diagnosis, but there's always a disclaimer saying seek a professional help, and this is not something that you have to take as it is right away. I don't know.
So thank you. So more on ano lang siya, sir. They can assist and they can assist medical professionals, but they cannot again as kagaya nung na-conclude natin kanina, they cannot replace doctors or caregivers or health professionals first. And they can help, but they cannot replace. Right. Okay. Okay. Ayan. Thank you, sir. So there's another question from Miss Corpus or sorry, Miss Canula. So do you think that AI has the ability, or can AI has a possibility to recover brain dead situations like people in coma? So if they can help in providing medical assistance for patients with such concerns like people in coma or brain dead situations.
Okay. People in coma, or I don't, so at least with the AI technology that we have at the moment, AIs are being used, or they're trying to develop AIs that can decode brain activity. So if there's no brain activity, I don't know if AI will be able to kind of revive that brain wave. Yes, that's my understanding in terms of the AI aspect. Although just maybe maybe it's a little bit outside the scope, but there are research in neuroscience out there that tries to map the brain, and if you, in theory, in theory and in I guess best case scenario, if you are able to map the brain and every single specific connection of the brain, which are believed to encode the memories, perhaps you can, that again, best case scenario in an ideal situation, perhaps you can also regenerate those memories and have that kind of information that were once used to be in a person, but even though there's no brainwave activity, that information may still be encoded within the brain. But again, I'm just maybe connecting the two in that sense. But yes, those research of brain mapping is definitely a thing.
So, yeah, thank you, Sir Pablo. So, we have another question. Yeah. Is automation and AI the same? If not, what is or are there difference?
That's a very good question. In based on my understanding, they are not. Although a lot of tools that use automation does use AI as well, and the difference is mostly on the decision making aspect. So automation will, for example, in my lecture, we use an motorized bar to go up and down and deliver the food. That is automation. It doesn't use AI because it just goes up and down. An AI would be able to, for example, deliver the food right in front of the mouse. So, for example, the AI should be able to examine where the mouse is located and then specifically deliver that food in front of the mouse. Does that make sense? Yeah, hopefully that kind of clarifies the question.
Okay, so thank you again, sir. So, siguro let's consider one last question. So, actually, napag-usapan namin kanina dito yung about CAPTCHA and security questions when doing things online. Di ba? Pagka minsan may mga security questions na tinatanong sa atin to for us to prove that we are human. So, do you think that AI ba is a threat for accessing those information available in databases, in login pages? Kaya kailangan nating i-prove yung humanness natin.
If
why do we have to do that? What do you think?
Based on my understanding, those kind of validation, if we are robots or not, is to prevent automation for visiting a specific website, because there are programs out there that just collects clicks. So there are programs out there that just visits websites over and over again. So that's kind of like the website's defense in using those automated clicks, I guess. That is my understanding as to why these websites need validation. Now, if it's more security based, so for example, you're trying to access your personal information in a government website, then yes, it is. And then you answer these robot questions. That is one aspect. Perhaps there is someone that is trying to verify your identity, but I feel like with those security systems, it goes a little bit more than that. Usually you have to provide specific information about yourself or accept a request from your email, or you get a specific text message. So there's multiple verification system in terms of in that aspect. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Last na po, actually may pahabol lang po tayong question. So, how can AI be used in solving real-world problems and improving our society? So maybe yung nagtanong ay asking for some concrete applications, perhaps.
Okay, that's a good question. So I've listed some earlier regarding how AI can be used for virtual assistants, and in medicine, the use of prosthetics or diagnosis. It can help with diagnosis. But in terms of interpretation, there's actually this paper that was just published, I think, a couple of years ago, where they fed AI specific structures of drugs, and the AI was able to generate a bunch of potential structures or potential structures of drugs, chemical structure of drugs, and they tested its ability. So yeah, the AI gave a bunch of structures that it's possible to have a similar effect of those drugs, and then it gave compounds that can be used to create those sort of structures. So in that sense, AIs have also been used or is now being used for perhaps drug development. Yeah.
Okay, so ayan, thank you, Sir Pablo. Ayan, thank you, Sir Pablo, for sharing your knowledge with us. And ayan, thank you din sa participants for sending in your questions. And thank you for those thought-provoking questions. Ayan, so ayan, thank you, Sir Pablo. Ayan, thank you po. So some announcements lang po muna. Ayan, in relation to the question about or requests, ayan, request for providing the copy of presentations. Yan. The committee will provide a link for all the resources and materials. So i-email na lang yun, provided that a permission was granted by the speaker. So ayan. Thank you for attending lecture 1. So now I will pass on the mic to Miss Chelsea Bagni to for us to start in the lecture 2, which is about citizen science, or the C in science is citizen, leveraging science communication, systems thinking, and citizen science for development.
We're back. I am Chelsea Nicole Bagni, the moderator for the next speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the next speaker. Sir Dane Frawley Soriano is an assistant professor at the Department of Biology at the University of the Philippines, Baguio. He was a former member of the National Youth Council of the Worldwide Fund for Nature Philippines and the current representative of the biodiversity and environment sector to the United Nations Youth Advisory Board. He obtained his Bachelor of Science in Biology in 2016 from the University of the Philippines, Baguio, and took units under the Master of Science in Conservation and Restoration Ecology at the same university. He finished his Master of Science in Environmental Management at the University of Reading, United Kingdom, under the Chevening Scholarship Program, the international scholarship program of the UK government funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office and partner organizations, and considered one of the most prestigious international scholarships worldwide. Apart from his MSc, he also completed the University of Reading Henley Business School Emerging Leaders Program on Strategic Management, Managing People and Organizations, and Managing Change and Innovation. Sir Dane was also a Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Academic Fellow under the Global Environmental Issues and Natural Resource Management Program at the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center at the University of Montana. In June 2020, he has been nominated and became a grand finalist for the EWC Earth Optimism Awards for Southeast Asia under the Research and Discovery category. In May 2021, he became a Next Gen Leadership Program Fellow organized by the Ramon Magsaysay Award Foundation Transformative Leadership Institute. In his stint as a faculty member of UP Baguio, he has been part of several research projects ranging from biodiversity assessments in urban forests, island ecosystems, and aquatic ecosystems across northern Luzon and the Cordillera Administrative Region. He has actively engaged with environmental and civic NGOs, private partners and institutions, and government agencies through his research and extension work as an educator and advocate for several causes. For the past 8 years, he has been advocating for the protection of the Philippines' natural heritage and the conservation of ecosystems and habitats. He personally believes that environmental protection, awareness, and sustainable living are core facets that should permeate into the lifestyle of every Filipino. At 27, Sir Dane is an independent, ambitious, determined, and optimistic Filipino who aspires for nothing but the best for our planet and our people. Let us all welcome Assistant Professor Dane Frawley Soriano.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Thank you very much, Chelsea, for the rather lengthy introduction, but I do appreciate you introducing me for this morning. May I just ask the audience if I am audible? Kasi baka may hindi pala ako naririnig, daldal ako ng daldal. Naririnig? Okay, loud and clear. Thank you very much for that. So again, good morning. Let me just try to share my screen. Wait for a sec. Okay, I hope you're seeing something. May nakikita po ba kayo? Okay, thank you very much for that. So, again, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to this SINSM and also to speak about citizen science, systems thinking, and science communication. So I prepared a very brief and short lecture on those particular topics, but the title of my presentation is The C in Science as Citizen, leveraging science communication, systems thinking, and citizen science for development. So let me start by telling you and all of the audience members and all who's listening via our social media live stream that as scientists, we all start with one thing. And probably every single scientist in this country and probably in the entire world is always familiar with this first step in the scientific method. And that is in terms of identifying a problem. I think a lot of scientists, a lot of educators, and a lot of people who's doing research, we start by identifying a specific problem, may it be in our school, in our university, in our own institutions, and in our community. So we always identify a problem. But there are loads of problems right now that we face in this surface of our planet. There's problems on climate change, there's problems on food insecurity, antibiotic resistance, or emerging infectious diseases, or environmental degradation, even in bioethics, or just the plain lack of research funding in our institutions, primarily those who are in the academe. So it's okay and it's valid to feel overwhelmed or maybe worried or maybe anxious at some point, because these are problems that we face, not just, people living in a community, but rather every single individual or every single entity in this planet. But in the context of understanding science and understanding how we identify problems as scientists and as researchers, we can actually categorize the problems that I've mentioned earlier as what we call wicked problems. I believe this would be probably your first time hearing such terminology. So in systems thinking, in design thinking, in innovation, and in development and management, we call these wicked problems. Wicked problems are open-ended, complex problems without clear solutions, which involve both social and scientific challenges. Feeling ko naman po lahat tayo here have been doing research, or maybe you're in that position where you want to do research. And as a scientist, we always use, pieces of evidence, or we use science as the background or the anchor of how we do research. But because we have problems such as wicked problems, these are problems where we cannot just use a single tool or a single mindset for us to be able to solve such environmental or social or economic or scientific problems. So these wicked problems are very rampant in our community and in any setup for that matter. Now, what do we do then? And where do you think you, as a scientist or as a researcher or as an educator, can contribute in answering those wicked problems? First, we start with the proper mindset. I believe that in any particular problem, it starts with not just having the right tools or the right medium, but having the proper mindset and having that mental space to actually deal with the problems that we're currently facing. So when we look at problems, in particular, we always try to look at it in different angles. We look at its parts, its patterns, and the purpose. And kung mapapansin nyo, yung three components na yan is actually the definition of what a system is. We always define system as the different parts with different functions but would act as one entity or one unit. We'll look at it at different parts, but there are different patterns in each of those components. And those patterns leveraging out from the different components and the different parts would actually impose or would actually give a specific purpose. And that's how we try to frame our mind when we're trying to answer wicked problems such as climate change or like biodiversity loss or like maybe food insecurity. All of those are examples of biological and ecological wicked problems that may be quite overwhelming for a single scientist to put a solution on. But if we try to look at it in different angles, using the different components of what a system is, it's quite easier to come up with a innovative and an app and context-based solution. So in essence, systems thinking is a holistic approach to problem solving that considers the interconnected relationships and dynamics of a system. It involves understanding how the components of a system interact with each other and with the larger environment to achieve certain outcomes. As you can see, I've highlighted some of the keywords when we're trying to frame our mind into using the systems thinking mindset in coming up with solutions for our environmental problems. Because most of the time, there's a tendency for scientists or educators or researchers to come up with a band-aid solution for some of our problems, may it be in our community, or in our school, or in our university, or in any other institution. And it's very rampant for scientists across the Philippines and all over the world to just shove solutions to community problems that are actually not effective when it's implemented in a given context. And that is why we have to frame our mindset trying to solve wicked problems. And it has to be holistic. And we have to consider how the parts of a given system or of a given problem are interconnected to one another and how they interact with one another to achieve certain outcomes. Now, when we're doing systems thinking, we're dealing with different parts, and these parts would have different functions, but would ultimately interact with one another for a common goal. But in systems thinking, and when we're trying to build, say, for example, a scientific project or an innovation or a piece of technology, it's important to see the whole picture when we're trying to use the systems thinking as a framework to come up with solutions. It's also important that we engage in different perspectives for that matter, simply because there's no one or there's no single solution to a huge problem, especially the wicked problems that tend to be very complex and very big. And, no single scientist can solve a wicked problem. We also have to look at leverage points, to look at relationships, and to look for consequences. Remember, when we're trying to study systems, say, for example, when we're studying the circulatory system or the endocrine system, we're trying to look at feedback. We're trying to look at feedback loops because we can actually determine where to improve at and where are the particular portions of that system that are actually working, that are actually effective. We tend to think circular as well. Gone were the days where we used to do like a linear base of thinking where we just have a single solution for a very complicated problem. But right now, we tend to think circular if we want to use the systems thinking mindset as a framework to solve our wicked problems. And apart from that, we have to embrace complexity. Part of dealing with wicked problems is actually dealing with a lot of complex issues. Kaya nga natin minsan nare-realize na pag nagpunta tayo sa community, for example, I am a biodiversity ecologist. I'm an ecologist. I'm a biologist. So I work on the ground. I do a lot of field works. And when I ask community members, what are your problems in terms of biodiversity or biodiversity loss? A lot of problems are actually arising, but from those problems, there are sub-problems from those problems alone. And that's the reason why these are wicked problems, because they tend to be very complex. And at the same time, they branch out from one problem to the other. And that is why it's important for us to embrace complexity. And again, linking it back to how we engage with different perspectives and how we see new leverage points for us to be able to formulate, effective and context-based solutions in doing scientific work or scientific initiatives for that matter. And lastly, when we're doing systems thinking, we want to question assumptions, because there's a tendency for us to think of a specific solution for a specific problem, and we think that that's the ultimate solution for that problem already. But when you're doing systems thinking, you have to go back. Is this really the solution for this particular problem? Is this really the cure for this environmental woe? You have to consider all of those if you're trying to do systems thinking, if you want to come up with a specific solution. So again, just to emphasize that in systems thinking, we're always looking at the figures on your right. So instead of trying to disconnect certain portions of the system, you want to connect and be a dot connector, and you want to establish certain relationships between parts of a system for you to be able to understand what are the needs of these specific parts and how can you intervene as a scientist or as an educator or as a researcher for you to be able to do work. Again, from a linear perspective, we shift towards a circular perspective because there's sustainability in coming up with solutions, and you want to think in the long run. You want certain solutions to still be actively engaged in the long run. You also want to remove portions of that system, of that systemic problem in silos and come out and actually emerge so that you actually have a holistic view of the problem that you want to solve. It's also important that you see the whole picture rather than focusing on a single part, because even if you focus on a single part, it could be that when it's partnered with another component in that system, it could function differently. And that is why there's also value in trying to understand the complete picture. And you're not just also trying to analyze how certain portions or certain actors in a community work, but you're trying to synthesize everything together and come up with a comprehensive understanding as to why this system is wrong and as to why the system needs to be worked on. And finally, we have to go out of isolation and build and try to craft that relationship across the different parts in the systems. So that's how we deal with certain wicked problems and how we try to solve those problems using the systems thinking mindset. It's important, and I'm trying to emphasize this because, again, a lot of us scientists have this messianic complex where we tend to think that my research project or this scientific initiative is the solution for the problem in food insecurity or climate change or biodiversity loss. But in reality, these problems are super complex and you can't have like a single solution for that particular problem. This mindset is important because it will help you identify the root cause of the problem. It will give you a broader context. It would actually foster collaboration, and it builds a sense of foresight on which you can plan for uncertainty and which would help you monitor and evaluate the success of the initiatives that you're trying to put on into the community or into the world. Now, second, we use the appropriate tools. And I think yesterday, some of the participants in this meeting have already been lectured on the concept of citizen science. Citizen science is a very important tool in doing systems thinking and in trying to answer our wicked problems. Citizen science is public participation and collaboration, wherein we sometimes use digital technology and other tools to facilitate participation of communities to scientific research or data collection. Professor Dizon yesterday was able to mention a wide array of citizen science initiatives in the Philippines and in abroad with different techniques and methods, particularly in trying to solve environmental problems in marine ecosystems, in terrestrial ecosystems across the country and in a worldwide setting. And I think people should realize that apart from citizen, the other C in science is collaboration. Collaboration is a big thing in science because we tend to branch out from our silos and we tend to emerge from that system of a single-minded and very myopic thinking that this is the ultimate solution for a single problem. But then we can foster collaboration so that we can harness different talents and skills of the public, whether they are scientists or whether they don't have any background in science at all. We could actually help them participate in scientific research or data collection for that matter. Now, third, we let the world know. This is very important because I've mentioned about the C in science being citizen and the C in science being collaboration. It's important that we communicate the science that we know. And this is somehow the core of my brief lecture for today. We want to communicate science because we want to spread knowledge. That's the foremost thing about what we do as scientists, apart from trying to do molecular biology work or trying to do ecological sampling in the field. We want to spread knowledge about the things that's happening in our world. We want also to enhance public understanding. I think a very core of science communication and being a scientist is that we want the common people to understand our work and make it impactful towards those communities and towards those people, which then promotes scientific literacy. We've all experienced being in the silos, being in the isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think you're well aware of that there's been a huge wave of disinformation in social media. And because of that, there's been a rise in and a call for science communicators to actually step up and try to enhance public understanding and promote scientific literacy to combat disinformation, especially in social media. I remember there was this one social media post about these are the fruits that you can eat to prevent contracting COVID-19. So there was this list of citrus fruits, and then there was like another column showing the pH of these fruits. And it was so bizarre and it was so faulty because the pH of a citrus fruit was actually around like 9 or 10, which means that it's basic. But in reality, you would know that citrus fruits are acidic. So it's kind of weird because people in general in social media has this unlimited access to information. Lahat tayo may access sa social media eh. Even our mothers, our fathers, our parents, our siblings, our relatives, our friends. We have unlimited access to information in the internet. And one Google away, one click away, you could see or you could check information in the World Wide Web. However, The thing with that is because there's no control, because there's no filter to what we're reading online, it's subject to multiple interpretations. And with that multiple interpretations, obviously, there's going to be chaos. And that's the reason why scientists, those people engaging in research and scientific research, have to partner with scientific communicators, or maybe they could train as scientific communicators to enhance public understanding and scientific literacy, because they have to be the voice in this, very chaotic times, especially in social media. It's also important that we communicate the science that we know, because this would foster critical thinking. And I think there's value in trying to share pieces of information, pieces of scientific information, social media, because this would foster critical thinking, not just in your echo chambers as a scientist or as a researcher, but also being able to hear the thoughts of the public community that you're trying to deal with. And this would also encourage collaboration and influence policy. That's the core of why we communicate science. There are three major pillars of science communication: trustworthiness and scientific rigor, presentation and style, and connection with the society. And each of the three pillars that you see have sub-pillars. Like in trustworthiness, it has to be scientific, factual, balanced, and transparent. Obviously, you want, when you share something on your social media or on Facebook, or even for educators in this webinar right now, when you're sharing something in your PowerPoint presentations to your students, you want to make sure that everything that you put in your scientific presentation is scientific and it's factual and transparent. It has to be anchored on pieces of evidence that can be confirmed. In terms of presentation and style, it has to be clear, coherent, it has to be spellbinding, and it has to be interactive with the audience. A lot of scientific communicators and a lot of scientists, and I would say this, not every single educator are capable of communicating. Not every scientist would actually be able to communicate very well. And that's the reason why maybe I'm sharing these pieces of knowledge with you as Zach, because it's important for you that you anchor scientific information and interact with your audience by coming up with a story. Scientific communication is storytelling as well. And you're trying to present what's happening in your environment, present what's happening in the scientific world to the general public through storytelling. And lastly, connection with the society. It has to be responsible, relatable, impactful, and purposeful. Everything that you put out, there's always this particular line that think before you click, or you have to be responsible with what you post on your social media, which is exactly the core of what you're doing when you're doing science communication. You have to be responsible, but you also have to be impactful and relatable when you try to communicate the science that you do. Again, these concepts on trustworthiness and scientific rigor and all the other pillars are well engaged in this PowerPoint presentation. You can actually read on that. I will not dig in deeper because obviously I've discussed it previously in the previous slide. But again, the major takeaway in science communication is that you have to tell a credible, relatable, and impactful stories. And one way that I do that personally as a scientist is to create my own visuals. I am very particular with what I put out as a teacher in UP, as a faculty member in UP. I make sure that when I share my lecture to my students, I try my best to come up with the best visuals to support what I'm trying to teach them. So in one of my classes before, I tried to make a visual for a scientific paper that I wrote for my coursework in my master's program. And this is in the sources, fate, and impacts of zinc nanoparticles on the aquatic environment. All of the stuff that you see on your screen right now is actually my own design and my own take from a scientific paper that I read and wrote for one of my requirements for my master's degree. And you see, it's also a way of fostering critical thinking, because when you digest scientific papers that you read online, it's actually trying to get portions and make sense out of these portions out of a scientific paper. So when you read, you can also try to visualize and try to come up with an aid, try to come up with a visual that will help you understand what you're trying to read, particularly in scientific papers. Another way that I tell my scientific stories to people is through maps. I love creating maps simply because I'm able to communicate and be relatable to people, especially when I go on field and when I go on the ground and try to explain to them that you are in danger of having a landslide, or you are in danger of being flooded because you are in a very low elevation. Creating maps and trying to come up with meaningful maps is actually storytelling, and it's science communication. These are examples of what I did, particularly for people, communities in Cordillera, particularly in the province of Kalinga. And again, a result of my scientific research, this is part of my dissertation, is to trying to tell them a story that the Abra River watershed, which is located in the province of Abra, has good ecological quality. And you can tell that without being boring and without sounding boring, through visuals and through maps. Again, there's a multitude of ways where you could communicate the science that the community needs. And it can be through visuals, it can be through videos. There's a lot of TikTok creators right now who are scientific communicators, and they're doing an amazing job in communicating the science that they know. Now, a key takeaway is that systems thinking is a way of understanding complex systems and the relationships among their components. And it's important for people to understand that trying to solve a very big problem is not easy, simply because there's a lot of branches that would come out of that problem. And trying to analyze it on a very, very, very holistic way would be very helpful in coming up or formulating particular solutions for that problem. Citizen science involves engaging members of the public in scientific research, providing data, opportunities, ideas, and insights, which actually bring you back to systems thinking and how the public can be an important concept and how can it be an important component in trying to solve particular wicked problem. And lastly, science communication can help make the results of citizen science more accessible and understandable to a wider audience. You've seen a lot of examples yesterday when Professor Dizon made a lecture on citizen science. What is citizen science and what are good examples of initiatives that are doing citizen science? But science communication is that medium that will help them make science accessible and understandable, not just for the participants in citizen science, not just for scientists, but for the wider audience and for their public community. So with that, thank you very much. And I hope you got something from this very brief, very short lecture on systems thinking, science communication, and citizen science. Let's connect. Feel free to email me. My email is there, or you could scan my link tree for for my portfolio and my website. So thank you very much for listening. And I'm very much willing to answer questions, or like if you have clarificatory questions, I'm very open to answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sir Dane. It is truly refreshing to listen to an accomplished and well-rounded scientist and educator. It was not only informative, but it was also motivating and inspiring. Just a reminder for our participants, please do not forget to answer our evaluation form to help us improve our future activities. Links are in the Zoom chat or through the QR codes flashed beside the speaker's picture. Okay, we could all agree that his talk was very interesting, and for sure you have a lot of questions for him. So please don't hesitate and keep your questions coming. But for now, it seems that the participants need more time to formulate their questions. With this, I hope you wouldn't mind if we open the Q&A portion with my questions. So, Sir Dane, my first question is, what do you think are the main ethical considerations that are involved when we speak of citizen science?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think in terms of the ethical considerations, actually there's a lot. In one, to provide the concrete example, meron kami before isang field work where we actually, if I remember it correctly, we're trying to identify and characterize a potentially undescribed species of a plant. I was with a colleague before, and I remember obviously you want to take, say for example, GPS coordinates of that particular specimen in the wild, because you want to know kung ano yung kanyang location, and you want to obviously have it published and all that. But it's also very important to consider that there's a lot of bioprospectors out there and a lot of people who is into illegal poaching of wildlife. Okay, yung randomly kumukuha na lang sila ng halaman, sinasako nila, and they sell it, or I don't know, they cultivate it so that they could sell it in the market. And I think it's still ongoing right now, and it's still very difficult to regulate. So the reason why you want to be very protective of the data that you're trying to collect as a citizen scientist, but also you don't want to hinder what could have been if we have this data, and what sense could we get from the data if this has been collected or not. So that's just a very specific, very context-based answer of like ethical considerations when we're doing citizen science. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not violating any laws, particularly human rights, ethical considerations for humans, especially if you're dealing with specimens, living specimens for that matter. You also want to be very careful when you're going to places where there's an IPLC or Indigenous peoples and local communities, because obviously they are protected by certain laws in a specific country or in a specific place. So there's a lot. And that's where the scientist who's actually trained in doing science, the citizen scientists, the public community, policymakers, and other actors in that particular entity could act together and collaborate so that there's no breach in terms of the ethics that we do when we're doing science. Because obviously our citizen scientists would be very restricted in what they can do as citizen scientists. Scientists could be, the full-fledged scientists could be very well aware of these policies or if these ethical considerations, but the public might not be aware of those. So kailangan ma-balance out natin yung mga ganyang issues at ganyang considerations when we're doing citizen science. And that's the reason why I have to emphasize this. That's the reason why, again, I've been emphasizing this for quite some time already. We have to go out of that messianic complex that we know what the community needs. We have to co-create solutions with other scientists, and we have to co-create solutions with community members, especially like in my field, I'm doing biodiversity and ecological work. I don't hold any monopoly of the knowledge in biodiversity and ecology. And I wouldn't know what's happening on the ground without the inputs of the community who is on the ground. So again, it's an important for scientists or for educators who are training future scientists, who are training students to come up with their own scientific discoveries, that if you know that this would have social impact, you have to co-create your solutions with the community, because then it would be more purposeful and impactful, because they know they have been part of ideating and trying to come up with a solution for that specific problem, and that it would be more sustainable in the long run because they know how to do it and how it would last long in their community. So, yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. With Sir Dane's help and with the participants' help here, we could definitely inform others and help each other to avoid these ethical dilemmas. Okay, sir, we have other questions. First, sir. Hi, sir. Good morning. Do you think citizen science is also connected or has a relationship with environmental ethics? Or they really go hand in hand po? Thank you.
It depends. My answer for that would be it depends on the context, because, you know, the question on is citizen science, do you think citizen science is also connected or has a relationship with environmental ethics? Well, definitely. But sometimes you have to be able to decipher whether this would just be just normal, say for example, data collection, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be very restricted in the view of environmental ethics alone. The thing with that is, mahirap siyang i-separate as an entity, because again, you wanna prescribe yourself to the policies that are in place, and obviously you don't want to violate laws, and you don't want to have like ethical mishaps because hindi mo na consider tong aspect na to when you're doing citizen science work. Again, it's very difficult, and there's another side to that where are citizen scientists really capable of doing the work of like scientists or experts in a particular field? There's a debate on that, but obviously, kaya ko nga rin ina-emphasize yung importance of collaboration with scientists and scientists themselves being able to share what they know, because if the knowledge that is being generated and that is being known is being shared in a two-way manner, I think that citizen science initiatives would be very effective in terms of implementation in the community. Kasi alam mong effective siya, alam mong context-based siya, without necessarily violating any ethical considerations or policies or laws that are in place in a specific community. Yun naman meron ka laging hangganan sa pwede mong gawin bilang isang citizen scientist. And I think that's where your knowledge as an expert would come in, but also you as an expert trying to understand the context of the community that you're trying to serve.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have another question. How can data biases be prevented in contributive citizen science?
Okay, thank you. This is a bit technical, but in terms of biases, I think that's where you as an expert would come in. And I think if you have a sound experimental design, say for example, for a specific initiative, you want to be able to come up with a protocol or a workflow for your citizen scientists na alam nila kung ano yung gagawin nila, what data to collect, what data that is not needed to be collected, or ano yung data na pwede nilang i-disregard kasi this would contribute to a certain degree of uncertainty or error in your initiative. Again, dito pumapasok yung kaalaman mo bilang scientist na ito yung mga kailangan yung data na i-collect, ito yung mga data na hindi nyo kailangang i-collect or okay lang kung i-collect nyo but we will not consider this maybe because of ethical considerations or maybe because this is outside the objective of your citizen science initiative or program. It could be in those particular aspects where you could actually filter out kung ano ba talaga yung kung ano yung kailangan nilang i-collect or not, or ano yung kailangan nilang i-disregard or kailangan nilang i-consider in your initiative. Obviously, again, this would stem from the fact that citizen scientists, if you train them very well, they could be very credible in what they do. But if you don't train them, kaya nga part ng isang citizen science na initiative or program, yung training. Kasi hindi ka pwedeng mag-deploy ng citizen scientist mo, tapos suddenly, alam na nila kung ano yung gagawin nila. That would be counterproductive and counterintuitive. Kasi hindi naman nila alam yung ginagawa nila. Again, ito na naman yung nagbigay ka ng solution, pero wala naman palang may alam kung paano gamitin yung solution na binigay mo. And again, that's a messianic complex of some scientists out there na feeling nila, they know that this is the primary solution for that problem, but in reality, hindi. So again, to prevent that, I think what I can say is that you have to be very careful also of the design of your citizen science initiative or program. Kasi dyan talaga pumapasok yung degree of uncertainty pag hindi mo sila natitrain or hindi rin sound yung design ng program mo.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have another question. Sir, good morning. Indeed, such motivating and information lecture you had presented. If you will be conducting biomonitoring assessment in a particular system, the like coastal area, as in your discussion, we take into consideration citizen science which does involve a certain community. What particular protocols should we have to follow? Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. I will answer that piece by piece. Number one, in terms of the protocols, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the protocols, it actually depends on what problems have you identified in your community. Again, hindi ka makakagawa ng kahit anong citizen science initiative without a concrete problem in mind na gusto mong lutasin. Again, as scientists, dun tayo naka-anchor eh. We look for problems. We look for questions in our environment. We look at questions in our world and we try to build on those problems and those questions based from our curiosity as individuals and also our willingness to do and contribute to a particular solution for that particular problem. But you have to identify what problem you really want to solve. Kasi hindi ka makakagawa nga ng concrete na solution or na initiative pag hindi mo alam kung anong gusto mong lutisin. And based on your question, if it's like a biomonitoring assessment for like say example a coastal area, anong aspeto ng coastal area, anong problema sa coastal area na yon, anong kinakaharap ng community nila, those are some of the basic questions that you might want to ask yourself. And if you have like delimited it already, then most likely makaka-come up ka with a potential solution that you can co-create with the community in that particular coastal area. Again, there's no specific answer to this question and I cannot think of like a specific protocol or a specific workflow that I could link sa nagtanong kasi anong problema ba yung kinakaharap ng community mo? Is it in terms of sprawling? Is it in terms of sea level rise? Is it in terms of degrading ecosystems in the coastal community? Ano doon yung gusto mong lutasin? Yun yung mahalagang part ng pag-intindi natin sa citizen science. I just want to emphasize as well that remember earlier I mentioned about how systems thinking should be the mindset when we're doing citizen science work or science communication work. To be fair, and there is a balance that you need to achieve when you do come up with initiatives for citizen science. Kasi meron din tayong linear thinking. We also have design thinking, and obviously the largest one or the most holistic one would be systems thinking. But the thing with that is you have to achieve balance out of all three types of mindsets when you're trying to come up with a citizen science initiative. Because, say for example, if you're just a linear thinker, pwede kang mag-focus lang on a single aspect of a problem, but you don't necessarily see the entire picture of the problem. If you're a design thinker, on the other hand, you might end up creating a very creative, a very wonderful solution for a specific problem, but it's not the problem that you want to necessarily solve in the community. And those solutions could perpetuate more problems in the long run. If you're just a systems thinker, at the same time, you might get paralyzed. Again, there's a disadvantage also when you're doing systems thinking, because you might get paralyzed in the process of thinking, oh my God, this is a problem as well. This is a problem as well. This is a problem as well. So how do I deal with that? And you might get paralyzed in the process because it's overwhelming and it's full of sub-problems that you want to solve at the same time. And in the end, baka wala ka na lang din gawin kasi ang komplikado nga ng problema mo. So there has to be a balance between the mindsets that you use when you deal with a specific wicked problem. So once na-dissect mo yung problema na to, what is the right mindset and what are the right tools to deal with this particular problem? Yun yung mahalagang tandaan natin when we're coming up with initiatives or programs for the community. Kasi minsan hindi lahat yan nagtutugma. Kaya in the end, any program, any scientific program, any result of research could fail if hindi ganun yung pagtingin natin with the problems that we're trying to solve. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Sadly, we have to end the Q&A portion because we still have more to look forward to from Sir Dane. If you have other questions later on, please reach out to us with these questions. Sir Dane would be happy to answer them. Okay, up next is the workshop on science communication and social media. Back to you, Sir Dane.
Oops. Okay. So for our participants, for our SINSM participants, it's time to have fun. And it's always important to have fun while we're learning. So we're doing a very fun, I hope, workshop on science communication and social media. So if you get your phone, if you can get your phone and scan this QR code, this will lead you to a
Jeniza, Jenny Grace Almazan, Vanessa Albino, Micah Alera Duliao, and Jasmine Jane Ramos. Congratulations! Okay, thank you so much, Sir Dane. Thank you so much, participants. We definitely learned a lot this morning from Sir Dane and Sir Pablo. So to recognize the excellent presentations from our speakers, Sir Dane and Sir Pablo, in sharing their expertise and experience, please allow me to read the citation for their Certificate of Appreciation. For Sir Pablo, this Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Assistant Professor Pablo V. Serrano for his valuable input in the 28th SINSM Biology Cluster with theme Facilitating the Collation and Interpretation of Biodiversity Information in the Digital Age, held via online webinar platform this 28th day of April 2013. Signed by Professor Radi J. Remigio, SINSM Committee Chairperson, and Professor Dimfna N. Javier, Dean of the College of Science. For Sir Dane, this Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Assistant Professor Dane Frawley Soriano for his valuable input in the 28th SINSM Biology Cluster with theme Facilitating the Collation and Interpretation of Biodiversity Information in the Digital Age, held via online webinar platform this 28th day of April 2023. Signed, Professor Radi J. Remigio, SINSM Committee Chairperson, and Professor Dimfna N. Javier, Dean of the College of Science. We would also like to thank all of our participants this morning. That's a wrap for the morning session, and just a few reminders. Please don't forget to register using the link for April 28 p.m. session. It's a separate file that was sent to you via email, so please refer to that. Please enjoy your break, and we will be back at 1:30 p.m. for another lecture on Back to Bank, Basic Phylogeny using the GenBank web tool.